Okay, happy holidays, year 9, but hopefully you are still working on preparing for your Of Mice and Men essay. So today we're going to look at how to devise a thesis statement and how to plan an essay. We're going to look at a different question to the one we looked at in class. Today we're going to look at crooks. Um, so we've looked at a relationship question, and now we're going to look at a character question. It's the same format as the one that we looked at before. You can see it's read the following passage and then answer part A and part B. So when we come to looking at these sorts of questions, we need to read the question to start with. Now, I would always read the actual question before I annotate the passage. I'd probably read the passage first without making any notes or adjustments, and then read the question. We'll go through each of the following steps one by one, but you can see here we have a roadmap. So we're going to read the question, then place the passage in context, both in the novel and a wider context, then annotate the passage closely, and finally using the question to plan an answer. Then we're going to move on to writing a thesis statement, then writing an introduction, then body paragraphs, writing a conclusion as well. So I'm going to take you through these ideas. We're going to use a different version of the writing an essay template that we looked at in class. This one is more generic so that you could adapt it for your for different questions, but it follows the same idea. So we're going to start off by making a simple, clear point that answers the question, placing the passage in context, and this will form our introduction. Then our first body paragraph will be introducing a method and moving through the different themes and potentially the different characters. So we'll have a look at this in more detail as we move on, but this is where we're going. And obviously there might be different themes, different ideas that come up to us. These are just some of the things that we might choose to talk about in terms of Mice and Men. So let's return to the question. Here we have the passage. So I'll leave you to read the passage on your own to begin with, and then I'll talk you through the question itself. So just pause the video now and take a moment to read that passage. Okay, so you should have read the passage now. We're going to move on to this question. Now, part A says, what do you learn about crooks from the details in this passage? Refer closely to the passage in your answer. And then part B, how do other characters treat crooks in the novel? What does the treatment of crooks tell you about the attitudes towards black people in the society in which the novel is set? In part B, you should write about how other characters treat crooks and what they say about him, and the methods Steinbeck uses to show attitudes towards black people in the society in which the novel is set. Okay. So before we even use these ideas to annotate the actual question, we might want to think about what we know about this passage and about the context at the time. So the first thing I would probably do is make a note. Okay, so the first note that I might make will be here. Okay, and obviously if I was doing this on paper, I'd be doing this by hand. But let's have a think about the context and treatment of African Americans. So one thing that we notice as we read the novel is that crooks is treated differently by different characters. So sympathetic characters, ones that we are meant to relate to and respond to and like as we read the novel, they treat crooks with more respect. Okay, now you might want to think about which characters treat crooks with less respect. And what does that reveal about the society? We might want to think about Curly's wife. She threatens crooks. Okay, I think that Curly's father, the boss, who apparently gives crooks hell, when Candy is talking about him, he says that, well, because Crooks is a nigger, that the boss gives him hell. Okay, and then we also have that episode shortly after that where people are kind of calling him in a sing-song taunting voice, "Oh, stable buck," as well, which sort of represents that idea of disrespect, of poor treatment. But we have also our sympathetic characters. Slim treats him with respect, Candy, and of course Lenny. All right, so we have this idea that characters who we respect and admire on the farm, perhaps not as much Lenny, but they treat crooks with more respect. All right, so that's where we might think about this. We might also want to think about broader context here as well. So the idea of lynching, which was prevalent at the time. We might want to think about how, the Civil War is actually not that long ago in America. It's within the last 100 years. It is in living memory. And so those are some things that we might want to think about. Crooks is also, Crooks' family are from California. They owned property. And so we have this idea that actually Crooks has come down in society, and that there's that idea that a black family in America could have property and could be treated better even than the people who were the migrant workers at the time. So those are some things to keep in mind as you're reading this passage. You can do more research into the context so that you are confident to write about, racism or gender or the Great Depression. That's up to you to make sure that you have that solid understanding. Now, in terms of where this comes in the text, okay, so context in the whole text. Let's have a look up here. So the context in terms of the position in the novel, this is the beginning of chapter 4. This is right before Lenny comes in. George and the other workers are at the cat house, which is a term for a brothel, or a place where men would go to sleep with prostitutes. So no one else is on the farm at the moment except for Crooks, Candy, Lenny, and Curly's wife. All right, so that's where this is positioned. Now let's have a look at the actual extract itself and annotate this more closely.